Okay, that should be done now. We're flying. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, we're gonna make a start. Okay. Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me today. We are going to be talking about the Series 1 of Company Law and how we can essentially give you the skills and resources necessary so you can make a decision whether the company that you're in at the moment is the right one for you, or if you're just in the setting up phase, what's the right way to kind of kick it off. So if you can go to the next one, please, Talia. Sorry, there's just a little bit of a delay. But essentially, what this idea is to give you just a general insight into the law and how it's applicable to both entrepreneurs and business owners alike. And this specific module is going to be all about company structures and how that's going to be able to affect you in terms of the company law. Okay, so just a little bit of background about what this is. So it's just free information provided in an informal environment which can provide you with an understanding of how the law works in the UK. It's also a great opportunity for you to ask some questions, anything that you may be worried about, concerned about, you just can't find the answer somewhere else. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, so just drop them into the chat and I'll come across them as we do. I just want to kind of make it clear that what it's not, we're not giving you any legal advice here and it shouldn't be taken as such. I want to kind of give you as much information as I can so you can do your own research, go and find out your own information and make a decision for you. We're not responsible for any decisions that may affect you or your business. And although I've tried my best to make sure all the information is correct, I'm also not responsible for any misinformation that it is caused. So if you're all happy to continue, we'll get cracking. So Series 1. Series 1 is going to be company law, so everything around what is relevant to companies and the law in the UK. So specifically what we're going to be starting off looking at is the company structure and how we can incorporate them. Then we're going to be moving on to the rights, duties and obligations of a director and a shareholder. And then we're going to finish this series off with what happens when things go wrong. So just for today, for an hour of your time, I'm just going to be hitting you up with the company structures and how you can best go about incorporating them. Okay, so before we get started with companies, I just want to just kick off with a little bit of a discussion about the difference between incorporated and unincorporated companies. So incorporated is like a company that's in an official capacity that is working for a goal of making profit. Unincorporated organisations are things like groups. They can, like brownies, guides, community groups. Though they can be incorporated in an official capacity, a lot of these run unincorporated. You can still get access to like bank accounts, things like that. But there's just a lot of things that can go wrong when it's unincorporated. So there is a lot of risk involved in that. But for this session specifically, we're just going to be looking at unincorporated company structures and go from there. If you do have an unincorporated company and you want to kind of look at what's the best way, hopefully this session will be able to provide you with that insight. Next one, please, Talia. Okay, so start off with company structures and then I'm going to be talking about how you can actually implement them. So we're going to start off with just giving you a general insight into what structures are available within the UK, and then I'm going to drill in a little bit deeper into giving you an understanding. So to start off with, we've got sole traders, also known as freelancers. Then we've got partnerships, and essentially what partnerships are is they are two individuals coming together for a cause. Then you've got things like private limited companies, which is what most people be aware of, limited companies. And then we've got companies that go on the stock exchange, and they're called public limited companies. And then we've got things like charities, and then charities sit here, private limited companies sit here, and then in between we've got things like CICs, CIOs, and CIPs, and cooperatives and things like that. And I just want to make it clear, although some of these might not be applicable to yourself, it's really worth knowing how these structures work, because as a business owner, you will have different people that you'll be working with, and as a result of the people that you work with, the effects that will have on your business will be profound depending upon who you do business with. So I'll give you a little bit of insight. As a business owner, if you own a limited company and you deal with a sole trader, and if things were to go wrong, you could personally sue that individual. However, if you were doing limited to limited and that company was to go bust, unfortunately, you would have to essentially wait until that company was wound up. And if there was any assets, you would then be entitled to what was left over. You wouldn't personally be able to sue the directors of that company. That's the benefit of having a private limited company. So when you are in business, it's really worth considering, who am I actually doing business with? Yes, they could be a good customer, but if you're going to give them 5, 10, 15,000 pounds worth of credit, you've got to understand the risk that can come with that. Okay, so let's kick it off with sole traders, what they are and what they do. Okay, so sole traders are defined by a person who is singly and the exclusive owner of a business. Therefore, they're entitled to keep all the profits after tax has been paid. But the flip side to that is you're also liable to any losses that happen. So if your company makes a loss of £5,000, you can't just write that off as like an expense and carry that over to your next year's worth of trading. You're going to have to find that £5,000 loss to cover the basis of that. You must follow certain rules about running and naming your business. However, there's a lot more flexibility when it comes to sole traders. It means that there's no paperwork involved, there's no registration involved. The only thing that you have to do is register with HMRC just to let them know that your method of earning money has now gone to a self-employment basis rather than a PAYE. So basically, the HMRC are now aware that they're waiting for information from you rather than waiting for information from their employer. So basically, you become your own employer, really. Okay, let's go into a little bit more. So when do you need to register as a sole trader? So the great thing about the UK is you can earn £1,000 before you even have to do anything. You don't have to declare it. You don't have to pay tax on it. So it's kind of like an incentivization for you to earn the first £1,000 before you know that this business is actually working. And at that £1,000 point, you make the decision: is this working? If it is, then you need to get registered. If it's not, you can call it quits. You can walk away from it without having to do too much. So the idea is that if you earn anything over £1,000, you need to register as self-employed, and then that first £1,000 will then be taken into account, and anything thereafter. The other reason when you'd need to look at self-employment is people that have got children in childcare. In order to claim tax relief off the childcare, which can be really expensive, you need the proof that you are self-employed. So although sometimes you don't necessarily need to register self-employed, you might only be earning £50 a week. That wouldn't equate to £1,000 across the year. But if you want the benefits that come with being self-employed, you might need to register for that. And then lastly, if you want to qualify for voluntary class 2 national insurance payments, you can also register as self-employed. In the UK, you are very reliant upon the national insurance contributions that you've made in order for you then to participate in your pension pot at the end. If you've not paid in enough, unfortunately, you won't be entitled to your pension. So a lot of people are assessing their situation as they get older, and you can log in onto HMRC and it'll be able to tell you whether you, at this moment in time, are in line with hitting the target of enough national insurance contributions. If you feel that you've not paid enough, go and check out. And if it genuinely says that you've not paid enough national contributions and it doesn't think that by the time that you reach retirement age that you will, you can then start kind of putting a little bit more into the pot to ensure that is available for you should you need it. Well, you will need it at the time of retirement. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the pros and cons a little bit more about sole trader and what it is for. So it's cheap and easier to run. It's flexible because you're the owner. You've not got to listen to other people's opinions, ideas. It's just yours idea. And you're only accountable to yourself. So that could be a con as well. But I like the fact that, it's just autonomous, your decision, let's run with it, and that's where we go. The downside is you are liable to the losses, and the funding can be limited to you. Because they think that they're investing in just you as a person rather than a bigger entity, they can feel that you may take the investment as a personal gain. So it can be quite tricky in relation to that. However, the big plus with a sole trader is if you are working with a limited company, they are more likely to give you credit or a line of credit because they know that you are on the line personally. So as a sole trader, you've got to kind of take into account, like, do I own my own house? Because if you own your own house, what's the worst case scenario? If I was to go bust, then I'm going to lose my house. If you don't own a house, then the risk is different. So it's very subjective and very different to every individual person. What you've got to do is kind of go, what is my risk? What is the reward and the benefits that come with it? And how would you kind of play both of them off with each other? Okay, let's move on to, I think we're going to be moving on to how. So how do we get yourself set up as a sole trader? I'm going to share these slides at the end of the link, at the end of this session. but just at the end, there's a link. You just click there, register for self-employment, and it will basically take you through a step-by-step guide of everything that you need to do. If you have any problems, get in touch and we'll help you. Okay, so partnerships. What a partnership is whereby you've got two individuals that are sole traders that want to kind of keep autonomy, but want to come together to form a partnership. So it's a relationship of two or more people carrying out a business with a view of making profit. It is not, however, a company. This is just two individuals coming together. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of detail about what a partnership is, what it isn't, the different types of partnerships. So partnerships are not a legal separate entity, and you and your partners are personally responsible for paying the bills. The only exclusion, which I'm going to move on to in a minute, is what's called a limited liability partnership. And what that allows you to do is essentially exclude some liability. However, just in the strictest sense of just what a partnership is all partners are responsible for running the business, and you share the profits between yourselves. So you aren't responsible for paying like corporation tax and things like that. You literally, what's my profit? What's my expenses? What have we made? What's my expenses? These are my profits. There's two individuals, 50-50 split, and you walk away with whatever you've got, and you pay your taxes accordingly on the amount that you've had. However, as a partner, you don't. The person that you partner with doesn't have to be a company. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be a limited company. So you could be an individual in your own right and a limited company to come together to create a partnership. So, for example, if you were looking to team up with a bigger company, but you weren't confident enough or you weren't prepared to necessarily go for a merger, you could necessarily create a partnership that allows you the flexibility and the autonomy to kind of come together when and as you please for this particular project. Okay, I'm just going to go through now the different types of partnerships that are available. But before that, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the pros and cons of what a partnership is in the strictest sense. So very flexible. It's easy to raise more capital by bringing more people into the business. So you can have a partnership of 2, of 10, of 15. It does get a little bit complicated, but you can have as many people as you want. Very low cost because there's no requirements to register with Companies House, and there's no need to kind of look at registration forms and documents and things like that. The one thing that you do have, which is also a plus within this, is, like I mentioned before, there's no capital gains tax or corporation tax that you need to pay. It's all income based. However, you've got to take into account if you're earning 50, 60, 70,000 pounds, you're not getting the benefits then of tax relief in terms of how much you're getting paid at each point. Okay, the negatives. It's not a separate legal entity from your partners, so you're all responsible should the worst happen and you went bust. Similarly, if your partner was to die, that partnership also dies together. Unlike a business whereby you would just necessarily replace that director or you would absorb that director's shareholdings. It's not like that with a partnership. That partnership would just cease to exist. I mentioned before, you're personally responsible for any losses made or debts incurred, and your share of the profit is also taxed as an income. And the biggest problem that you have with partnerships is disputes can be raised and there's no formal documentation for you to kind of fall back on. Oh, you said this, she said this. It's really difficult to kind of prove. And even if it is on an email, because it's not necessarily officially in any official capacity, it doesn't hold any water. It's unfortunately, if you don't agree as partners, you just have to both walk away. And that's it. Okay, let's give you some ideas of what kind of partnerships are available and what you can do. Okay, so we've got ordinary partnerships. So you and a partner, you have come together and you jointly share responsibility for running the business and you get to enjoy the profit. Well, as an idea, like I've already said to you, you're liable for the debts. So what you can do is if you wish to, you could get two people coming together, and for whatever reason, one of them is in a more financially lucrative situation than the other. So in order for that partnership to work, one says to the other, I will take liability from this any business that goes wrong, should it happen, and you will be essentially liable free. Your liability has been limited by this other person. So that needs to be documented. That needs to be a formal agreement that is between two individuals, three individuals, however many it may be, and it be signed, sealed, and kind of filed away in a process that means that should you need to refer to it at a later date, you can do. And then going from limited partnerships, we've got something called limited liability partnerships. So very much like a company where partners are not responsible for the debts. However, the issue is that you are responsible together So in terms of the way that the company runs, there's no constitution of the company, there's no articles of association. So you are responsible together of how this company runs. So the downside to a limited liability partnership is that you're still reliant upon goodwill of each other. And if you were to get into kind of confrontation or disagreement, that you could all agree between yourselves how to move forward. Okay, so how do you actually do this yourself? So we're going to start off with the ordinary partnership. So you only need three things. You just need to choose a name, nominate the people that are going to be partners of this, and then you need to register with a HMRC in relation to the partnership that you have and who it involves, basically. And that's very similar to how self-employment works. You would register with HMRC, but essentially you would be just nominating yourselves as like a pair, a trio, so on and so on. Okay, so next up, we've got how to set up a limited partnership. So slightly similar, but choose a name. You need a registered address, and then you need to appoint general and limited partners. So in a limited partnership, you can kind of choose the partners that you have. Are their liability going to be limited, or is it just going to be a general partnership? So like I said, between the two individuals, if one's in a more prosperous situation than the other, he could say to this one, I will take the liability on your behalf so you can get involved in this project at no kind of risk to yourself. However, you do have to register this with Companies House, so it's not like HMRC. This is Companies House that will keep all of these records. So again, it's a little bit more paperwork involved, a little bit more to do. You'll find as we go along, they start off quite simple, and then they get a little bit more complicated as you kind of go in delving into this a little bit more. Okay, so after limited liability, we've now got limited liability partnerships. Sorry, just back one, Talia. And this is a little bit more. So again, choose a name, registered address, 2 designated members, and then this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So what we're going to be doing is looking at like the agreement that you have and how will the company be run. Very much like a limited company, it's going to be articles of association and memorandum and how you're going to run it. And essentially, to give you a bit of insight, article of association is how you're going to run the company, and the memorandum is the agreement that shareholders and members have between themselves, how they'll treat each other. You know, I will make sure that I am available once a week for meetings. So one's like a very personal internal document, and the other one's an internal document about how the actual inner workings of the business are going to run, whether that be with their members or directors or different members and directors should they come along. So it's normally written by the founding member, and it'll normally kind of put in things like their ethos, their vision for the company, and things that they do and don't want to happen going forward. They can be changed, but in order for it to be changed, you need to kind of pass a vote, what's called a resolution, and that needs to kind of be passed by a certain percentages. And that's what we'll be talking about next week, the rights, responsibilities of directors, shareholders, members, and everyone else in between. Okay, so for anyone that is in Scotland, it gets a little bit difficult, but we'll cover it quickly. So you've got 2 options in Scotland. You've got what's called a general partnership, and you've got what's called a limited partnership, and just with the word Scottish in front of it. So a Scottish general partnership is each partner acts as an agent on behalf of an entity. So quite simply put, what the Scottish government are basically saying is that this partnership will exist as an entity, and you will all exist as an agent to that. So you are working essentially on behalf of that, and that's how you're then responsible for that company. But that company exists in its own right, and every partner that's involved within that company structure that works as an agent is going to be liable for unlimited debts, any losses that are incurred. So it allows the company itself to be a personnel and can kind of have its own legal structure. However, the people that are actually responsible for running it are responsible in their own right for this legal entity. So it can get really complicated. However, there's lots of benefits for that middle company to actually have its own legal entity itself. And then we've got Scottish Limited Partners Partnership, and these are taxed on the same shares of partnerships, income and gains according to their profits. However, very much like the limited liability that we spoke about before, you can limit the liability that you have. The flexibility that the Scottish government give you, though, is rather than it being person A or person B that is taking the responsibility, what happens here is that together you agree the nominal amount that you will be liable for. Maybe that be £1, £10, £1,000, however many it may be. And then if you were to go bust, you would then owe that much money back into that company, to HMRC, whoever it is that you owed that money to, and then you could kind of walk away afterwards. So there's a little bit more flexibility that the Scottish Government offer you. However, it's a lot more complex into how it's actually implemented. Okay, so moving on, let's tell you how you can do it. So very similar, set up and choose a name, nominal partner, register with HMRC. It's just the benefits that you actually get from the partnership is a little bit different, but the way you register it, very much the same. Okay, has anyone got any questions, or is everyone okay? Let me just check the chat. So, okay, we're good there, I think. Let me just check in the Discord chat. No, okay, we're all good. Okay. The most traditional that you'll probably ever come across is a limited company known as a private limited company. They don't call it a PLC because that's a public limited company, but it's just known as an acronym LTD. You'll see on the end of businesses, it'll either say limited or it'll say LTD at the end of it. Just to make a point on that I missed off the other slides. As a sole trader, you can name yourself whatever you want. You've just got to be aware that you cannot use the word limited or LTD at the end of it to imply that you could be a company. You're not allowed to do anything like that. But you've got a massive flexibility that you can kind of call yourself whatever you want. Okay, so let's get into private limited companies. So private limited companies. So there's two options that you've got with private limited companies. You can either have a private limited company that is owned by, regulated by shares or by guarantee. So by shares is essentially you would set up your organization and you would say that I would like X amount of shares, and them shares would then be available for you as the owner, as a shareholder, to however you saw fit. So it has separate finances from your personal one. So you can kind of keep all of your personal finances here and all your business expenses here, and they literally run as two separate entities. So it has shares in shareholders, and as a result of that, as you take on more shareholders into your organization, you will be responsible for listening to what they have to say, their input, different things depending upon how much shareholding that they have. But the benefit of having a company that's limited by shares, you get to keep any profits that you make after tax. However, most traditionally, most limited companies will reinvest them profits back in to the business, and at a later date may take dividends when the company is in a position to do so. Okay, in contrast with that, we've got what's called limited by guarantee. So it's legally separate from the people who run it, so very similar to limited by shares. And again, it is separated the finance from your personal. So, you've got the benefits of not being legally liable should things go wrong. However, it has some form of liability included in this. So again, talking about guarantees, as a director, what are you prepared to put on the line to guarantee an amount? So say you, for example, you were prepared to guarantee £1 million, then someone that was going to do business with you as a limited company might go, hang on a second, you've got no money, I'm not going to do business with you. However, if you were limited by guarantee and they knew that you were guaranteed to £1 million, their faith within your business is going to kind of go up a little bit, rather than working with a sole trader that they're thinking, well, he might not have assets, he might have assets. With a limited company, they often know when it's limited by shares that ultimately, if that business was to go bust and have no money, they're not getting their money back. So the limited by guarantee, you've got to be in a position to be able to guarantee something to these people. So there is a lot of benefits to it. However, most traditionally, most people don't have the capital to kind of, or they need it as working capital, so you can't afford to kind of do this limited by guarantee. And again, the investor its profits back into the company that it makes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you a quick overview of the pros and cons. So there's a clear outline and structure to a private limited company. So should anything go wrong, you know that you can draw up this agreement that you've got and said, when we created this company, this is what we said. This is how we said that we were going to run the company. This is what you said as a director, that you would do X, Y, and Z. And there's a little bit of accountability there for everyone that's involved. You've got the benefit of it being a separate legal entity. And ultimately, that the shareholders that have invested their money for the shares originally, should the company go bust, there is no liability for them in relation to the losses or debt that's being incurred. The downsides. Okay, there's a lot of high cost involved with setting up a limited company. I actually think that the cost involved is about £12, so it's cheap, but in relation to time that it's going to take you to actually implement can be quite a lot. So you've got things like the Constitution, Articles of Association, and the to do. So although the actual fee is quite cheap, the work behind it, there's quite a lot of work behind it to do. It can be quite rigid. You don't have the same flexibility that you have as a sole trader. If you've agreed something 6 months ago and you put it into your articles of association, unfortunately, you're going to have to stick with it, or you're going to have to put it to a vote and get it changed. However, you're going to have to justify to your shareholders, like, why are you making these changes? Is it necessary? Is it not? So the rigidity from a private limited company can be quite high, and it can frustrate a lot of people, especially people that have been self-employed, know what it's like to be autonomous, and then going into the private limited company route. It gets a little bit hard for some people. However, people that have just gone straight into private limited company, they don't know what the benefits of being a sole trader were, so they never knew anything different. Okay, and then lastly, you are responsible for paying corporation tax and capital gains, and then you have to publicly publish your accounts. So the good thing about partnerships is that you don't actually have to publish any accounts. You're not registered with Companies House, and HMRC will not publish your earnings. With a private limited company, you have to publish your accounts. Though they are kind of condensed accounts, it's not going to say like the specifics of everything that you've earned. But bottom line, people will be able to take an insight into your company and be able to see what is your profit, not what your profit, what have you made, what your liabilities, and essentially what like kind of cash do you have in the bank. You can get like a little bit of an insight into that business. And the reason why that is to kind of give a little bit of insight. So it gives a little bit of faith to the people that you're doing business with. So there's a lot of limited companies that are getting set up every single day, and on the face of it, it's kind of like a blank canvas. I don't know what this company does. Going into Companies House and going into a company, you can kind of see, okay, what's the structure? What's the articles of association? How does this business work? And then after about 12 months of it being registered, or 18 months, they'll have to file their first lot of accounts. You can then get a little bit of insight into the business. So if this business is saying we turn over 6 figures, and you go into Companies House and they're only turning over 4 figures, you can have a good understanding of where that company's at, and whether you want to do business with them. Okay, next up is how you do it. So you need to choose a name. You can go on Companies House and do a little bit of searching. If you've got an idea of what you want, just try and make sure that the company that you choose, or the idea that you choose, isn't already registered on Companies House. More specifically, that it's not actually got a trademark. So I can share it into the law group with you. So there's two places, Companies House and trademark website, and you can basically just search in between both of them, and you need to kind of try and find a word or something that resonates with your business name that isn't already registered. Okay, and then next after that, you need to decide the directors. So, you can have one director, you can have 10 directors, however many directors that you want it to be, you can have as many as you want. Sorry, just back one, please, Talia. So once you've decided, we're going to have these directors run it, who's going to own it? Normally it's just one person that sets up a business, and then they kind of offer them shares out accordingly. But sometimes you'll get 4 or 5 people that come together that all want a shareholding from the outset. So you need to be able to decide what is that, and are they going to be shareholders, so they actually invest their own money, or are they going to be guarantors where they come part of the company in the hope or in the premise that if things were to go wrong, they would be able to guarantee X amount of money should that happen. So again, it kind of gives them a little bit of flexibility that they don't have to kind of give up all of their capital straight away to invest. But should things go wrong, they're going to be on the line for it. So it's just kind of providing that flexibility as we go through this. What you'll find with the UK law is we're trying to be as flexible as we can to make it ideal for you within what you want to achieve. Okay, so once you've decided the directors and who the shareholders or guarantors are, you need to identify the person of significant control. So if it's just one person, one director, one shareholder, you don't need to do that because it's just going to be yourself. And if you argue with yourself, then so be it. But in terms of the person of significant control, so you've got 2 individuals together, and your best friends or your husband and wife. Most of the time things go okay, but when some things go wrong in business, especially when there's 2 people, you need to make sure that you're constantly moving forward. You don't ever want to be in a position of stagnation. And what can happen with two individuals, especially in a partnership, is if they can't agree, then they stagnate and they don't move forward. So the way that Companies House kind of tried to get around this is basically saying one person has to have what's called significant control. And essentially what that basically means is that should you both have 50%, that one person's vote would kind of override the others. And that can be really difficult when you've got two co-founders coming together to create something that they're both 50-50 shareholders on. But when it comes to making decisions, one of them is going to have to take the lead in terms of the person of significant control over the other. And that can kind of cause a lot of problems for people. Okay, and then we need to prepare the memorandum and the articles of association. So like I mentioned before, the memorandum is kind of, how is the company going to interact? So, the directors, what are you going to do? I'm going to meet you once a week. I'm going to meet you once a month. Having these conversations about what are people's expectations at the very start is really crucial to making a business work. Because if you don't have these set out from the start, you try getting directors to say, I want to meet 3 times a week. That might be unreasonable for them. Some directors that you might take on might be non-executive directors. Therefore, they've got other businesses, other ideas elsewhere, so they can't be with you all that time. Okay, and then we've got articles of association, and that is essentially how is the business going to run internally, day to day. How do you want this business to run? So, for example, we will never do business outside of the UK, for example, because we believe that we want to keep it British. Say that was what you wanted to do. That would then be written into your articles of association. That would be sent to Companies House. And should anyone in that business try to maneuver out of that, you can then call upon Companies House to provide that documentation for you then to kind of come together for that. Okay. So public limited companies, PLCs. So this is probably the goal that most people have to try and go IPO, try and get my company on the stock exchange. It's not the right thing for everyone because you can lose a lot of control. So I'll give you a little bit of insight in a minute. I'll give you some examples of what's kind of happened. So public limited company is a business that's traded on the stock market. They exist in their own right, and the company's finances are separate from the finances of the personal finances of its members. So very much like a private limited company, the only difference here is everything's public. So everything from the accounts, everything to your mission statement, your policies in relation to diversity, for example, sustainability, all of that is on public show. So the kind of coin what we kind of talk about is unless you've got all your ducks in order, don't go public, because once you've gone public, everything's exposed and you just open yourself up to scrutiny. So it's a long process to go public. However, there is a lot of benefits to be able to do it. Okay, so let's get into what the benefits of going public are and why you do it. Okay, so in order to go to have a public or to create a public entity, you need at least 2 shareholders. So you can't go public with just one person. You need at least 2. And you need to have at least issued shares to the public to a value of at least £50,000 or their prescribed value in euros before it can be traded. And that just basically means that in order for you to go on the stock market, you need to be worth something or at least offer something of at least 50,000 value. The reason why that is that you'd get companies that were worthless going on the stock exchange, and it caused absolute manic mania on the stock exchange for people investing in companies that think that they're worth doing, and it'll just cause a lot of mess. So you just try and put that requirement in there. You're also required to register with Companies House, and you're required to have at least 2 directors, and one of them must be an individual. So with a public limited company, unlike with a partnership where I mentioned that you could have like a person and a limited company, you have to have that with a public limited company as well. The reason being is if you had 2, say, private entities coming together, the benefits that you get from a private entity wouldn't then work well with a public entity. So say you had a limited company, a person, and then that was owned by a PLC. The PLC would have to give its accounts for itself. This person here wouldn't have to, and this person here wouldn't have to. So they're kind of under some kind of protection. And as you kind of get into this world, you'll start seeing that a lot of companies are owned by a PLC, but the actual company itself is privately limited. So you wouldn't be able to invest in that itself. You'd have to invest in its like parent company, which has its benefits because a lot of parent companies own more than one subsidiary. Therefore, the loss, should it ever occur, would be very limited. Just give you a little bit of an insight into kind of a few people that it's kind of happened to. So Richard Branson is a prime example with Virgin. What happened with Virgin is he went took it public, and over time he recognised that because the advantages of public is that the public can literally invest, as well as the public it can be things like private equity firms and things like that, is that he lost what he felt was control of the business. Therefore, he believed that the only way to gain back that control was to take that company private again. And I think 5 years later, that's what he did. So it's not impossible to go backwards either, but at the same time, it's just kind of worth knowing what are the benefits. Do I actually want to lose control? Do I not? Am I happy that if I was to lose control, what would that? How would that be? Sometimes in life, what we've got to kind of realize is, am I the right person to take this company to where it needs to be? Some people I've seen have kind of run a private limited company, then they go public, and then they step down because they recognize that I'm not the person to take this business into the direction it needs to be in. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't be still a shareholder. That just means that you aren't necessarily running the business day to day. You can employ a managing director then to do that for you. Okay, how do you do it? You just need to. So I've just gone over that. Public limited company, pros and cons. So once you've registered, you are typically easier to raise funds. So because the public can kind of literally see you on the stock exchange, it can be over and done with quite quickly. The way to raise funds can be quite, I can't think of the word, advantageous. You can also grow very, very quickly. So again, if you get an investment from a private equity firm and they flood your business with a lot of cash, you can then use that cash to then grow substantially quicker than you would ever have been able to with a private equity firm. And not only is it good for exposure, but with a private equity firm, normally you're going to be reliant upon going and pitching to companies, you singing and telling everyone about how great your company is. Sorry about the noise in the background. How great of a company it is. Whereas when you've got a public company, people will see if you're doing well, they will see you. And as a result of that, if they feel that you're in worthy investment, they'll invest in you. The downside. So the liability for each member is limited to the amount that they paid upon the shares. So if you invested £1 million for, say, 10% shares and that business was then to go bust, unfortunately, if there was no money left over in that company when it went insolvent, you would just lose your the money that you paid in. So there's a lot of risk of investing in a public limited company. However, no risk, no reward. I think that's how most people kind of see it. The downside is it's really heavily regulated. Like I said, you've got to publish every single part of your business. So everything from your rights and responsibilities towards your employees, what you're doing in relation to disabled people. There's just a lot that you've got to consider when you are in this situation. There is a high level of transparency needed. And the ultimate problem that you do have is that it could lead to massive loss of control. And if you don't want that, going public is not for you. And then lastly, the problem that can be with public limited companies is the shareholders that you've got to then listen to. If you then become a minority shareholder within your own organisation, you are going to be told essentially how the business is going to be run, or advised of how they would like it to be run based on their investment that they've put forward. Okay, next up, please, Talia. Okay, so we kind of covered now everything that is in relation to businesses. So now what I'm going to be able to cover with you is just a little bit about what is charity, and then what's in between charity status and businesses. So just give me 1 second. I just need to pop this on charge. Okay, so charities are organisations that are established for a charitable purpose only and are subject to charity law jurisdiction. So the idea behind this is if you've got an idea that you want to be able to provide value or purpose, and you're happy to be regulated on that basis, then a charity may be for you. So let's get into what it is and what it's not, and the pros and cons. So in order to make a charity, you need to be able to kind of have an idea. So what's the purpose behind this charity that you want to have? And essentially the UK government in England and Wales are looking for, it has a purpose that has for a public benefit. On the last slide just before, I put a link on there for you, so when I share the slides, you can just have a look at what the UK government are looking for specifically for England and Wales. And I've just put a little bit here in relation to Scotland. They've got like their own test that they kind of test for charity, what they call a charity test. In England and Wales, it is just that it has to be for a charitable purpose, for the public benefit, and there's no necessarily requirements. It's just that you need to hypothesize that you have got a business that has charitable purposes and it's for the public benefit, and outline what they are. Whereas with this charity test that you have in Scotland, Scotland have 16 kind of points of purpose, and if you don't fit within them 16 points of purpose, you can't register a Scottish charity. You just then have to just register an English charity and run it in Scotland. So you can get a little complicated. So, okay, you've now got your sorry, back one, please, Charlie. So you've worked out that you've got a charitable purpose. Now you need to find out who's going to help you. So you've got the idea. You need to find at least 2 other individuals. So 3 people are required to run a charity. So you need to find someone else that's got the same mission statement, the same values as you, in order to actually make this work and become a reality. Then what you need to do is choose a name for the charity and name it. Very similar again, check out what's already there. You don't want to be naming yourself something that already exists, because you'll then be in breach of trademarking and things like that. And then you need to kind of choose the structure of your charity. How are you actually going to structure it? Are you going to be an organization that reinvests the profits in the community? Are you then going to be a charity that kind of allows people to accept donations, and then in turn from that you're then spitting something else out, whether that be a product or a service? You need to just work out what is the structure of your company. How does the money come in, whether that be from outside investment, or whether that be like fundraising, things like that, grants and things. So once the money's come in, what you're going to do with it when it's inside the business, and what's going to be the outcome that's coming out on the outside. So you could be taking money here and spitting out on the other side a product that helps disabled people, for example, or you could be offering a service that helps people that are on low income. However it may be, you just need to work out how you're going to structure that within inside of your charity. And then what you need to do is create what's called a governing document. So very similar to an article of association. How is that going to be done? So between the 3 trustees, how are they going to work? Because it's a charity, people understand that they may not get a wage to start off with, and if that wage that they do get may be significantly less than what they'd get if they worked for a private company. So the reason that is it's really important to get that governing document in place, because again, you're going to have to rely upon it should the worst case happen, where your trustees aren't coming together for this general purpose. And in order to register a charity, if your annual income is over £5,000, so if it's under £5,000, there's no need to kind of set it up. But once you've hit £5,000 of income, so that can be donations, that can be grant money, it's just necessary income into the charity, you then need to register. And then, like I said, in Scotland, you need to pass a charity test. Okay, let's just have a quick look in the chat and see if there's any questions. Nope. Okay, we're all good. Okay, so the pros and cons. Pros of running a charity. Typically, it's easier to raise funds because people appreciate, you've gone to all of this effort to register a charity, you've got a registered charity number, you're in a little bit more of official capacity. As time's gone on, I will be honest, the amount of charities that now exist, I think that idea is somewhat becoming a little bit diluted, because people are realizing that, just because you're a charity doesn't mean that you are necessarily charitable, and that's very unfortunate position to be in, but that's just the reality that we're in at the moment. And then what else have we got? Fast-paced growth, limited members for it. Next one, please, Talia. Okay, so somewhere in between limited liability companies and charities, we've got something called a CIC, a charitable incorporated company. So this is a special type of limited company which exists to benefit the community rather than the shareholders. So what basically happens is you run your business like you would anyway, and when it comes to your profits, what you're doing with them. So again, very similar to a charity, you have a business on this side, so this is where you make your money, and then your profits, what you're doing with your profits. So rather than your profits being reinvested back into your shareholders, this kind of goes back out the business again. So this could be kind of like for something, for example, like I can't think off the top of my head, like a wellness group that are coming together to help each other with wellness problems. They need to make money, so they might open up a cafe. So the cafe generates money, it's open to the public, yada, yada, yada. Then the profits that are made from that are then distributed out to the community in order for them to participate in, I don't know, free cake or free tea and coffee themselves. So it's just trying to look at what's making you the money, and then when you've made the money, what you're doing with the profits. And ultimately, the profits need to go back into the community rather than into the shareholders' pockets. Next one, please, Talia. So we've now got CIO, which is quite similar to a CIC. However, it's an organisation rather than it being a company. So a charitable incorporated organisation is a corporate body which is not a company incorporated under the Companies Act. So it's an organisation, not a company. So although you have the benefits of all coming together under the provision of a charity, you don't have the requirements of registering with Companies House and then paying the fees that that involves, registering articles of association, memorandum. None of that is necessary. Think of a CIO as very much of what you would be is if you're a partnership, like the benefits of a partnership, but under the umbrella of a charity. So we've got CIC, which is charity and private company, and then we've got CIO, which is partnership and a little bit of charity. That's not necessarily strictly true, but that's to try and give you a little bit of insight into an understanding of how these two work. Part two, right? So we've now just gone over generally, what they are, what the structures are, how you can incorporate them, and the pros and cons. Has anyone got any questions in relation to this? So I'm looking for anyone that's if you don't have a business idea, and you're thinking do we go public, do we go private limited, do we go sole trader, questions like that. Or if you're sat here thinking, right, I'm a sole trader, but I could really do with going private, private limited, happy to answer any questions like that. Or if you're private limited, when you're thinking I did the wrong thing, if you're public as well, fantastic. I'd happily talk to you about that. So anyone got any questions in relation to the situation that they're in now, in relation to their company structure, and basically how is it that I can help? Either do you want a little bit more information? And if you're in none of them situations, and you just literally want a little bit more information, I'm happy to answer them questions as well. Let's have a quick look on Discord. What's a good structure for a gig service like Uber? So, Squid, are we talking about the Uber driver or Uber itself? Because the Uber driver will most likely be self-employed. However, the actual Uber itself is public. So, yeah, if you clarify which one that is, and I'll come back to you. Okay, there's no other questions, so I'm just going to just finish this off now with just a few things that you need to be aware of in relation to incorporating a business. So the three things: pre-incorporation, the constitution of a company, and finance and charges. So let's kick off with what is pre-incorporation. So before you start a company, often you will have conversations, the goals, the visions, the values that you have that you would like to implement in this company. The reality of it is that you will have so many conversations about your business that it'll never actually likely get implemented. So what you can do beforehand is, if you're really strongly passionate about the information that you want to be included in that contract or that constitution of a company, you can do it beforehand. It's not what's known as a pre-incorporation contract. So next slide, please, Talia. And essentially the benefits of pre-incorporation contract is if everyone at that moment in time agrees together, you can essentially sign a contract that is forming the parties or on behalf of the company before it's actually incorporated. And the benefit of this is that should you incorporate the business and fail to include these incorporation, what you outlined in this document, you can then bring that forward at a later date and say, well, this is what we decided before the company was actually incorporated. So can you please tell me why that's not in the Articles of Association or the Memorandum, for example? Okay, next one, please. And then we've got the constitution of the company. I brushed over this in a few details, but I just want to make it clear to you is that when you set up a private limited company, there's two main parts: Article of Association and the model articles. Essentially, what your articles of association, and your memorandum. So your articles of association is going to be how is the company going to be set up? What are the things that you're going to be doing? And then your memorandum is going to be there, how are these people that are all in there, shareholders, direct, how are they all going to be working together? And the reason why it's really important to get these documents right from the start is that should things go wrong, you're going to need to pull these documents back up. So in relation to your articles of association and your memorandum, you can adopt what's called like the model articles, and you can just essentially not create a constitution of how the company runs. The problem that you've got there is if you just go with model articles and no constitution together, is you run the risk of falling into problems later down the line. So if you're thinking about going private limited, then take the time now to consider all of your options, how it'll affect you, and what it is that you actually want. And then I'm just going to finish this off with finance and charges. So throughout this whole process, we've kind of talked about liability, no liability. The easiest way to explain this to you is you've got personal liability and corporate liability, and them two kind of entities come under what's called a persona, and them two personas are relevant to depend upon where you are. If you've got personal debt that is going to be added to the company, you are going to be liable for that even if the company doesn't exist afterwards. So let's give you an example. You own a private limited company and it has no value whatsoever. It's just brand new set up. You go to a suppliers and you turn around and say, I want 100 of these water bottles. I can't actually afford to pay them now. I would like to pay in 30 days. Most companies won't give you a 30-day, won't allow that. So what you could do instead is turn around and say, okay, well, how much is that going to cost me? £1,000. Well, what I'll do is I'll personally guarantee that £1,000 instead. So although you can't claim that £1,000 from my business, you can claim that from me personally, should that be. So you just need to be aware, like, some people say, I can get you a loan, I can get you this. And you might think, well, I'm private, so it's not going to affect me. Just understand that sometimes it can have a knock-on effect to you, even though on the face of it, it might not. Okay, that's everything. Next week, I am going to be talking about the rights, duties, and obligations of members, directors, and shareholders. And that's just going to give you a real good understanding of, what is it like to be a director? What is my duty? What is it am I responsible for? As a shareholder, what am I responsible for? A lot of shareholders think that they can dictate the day-to-day running of the business. What they actually need to be doing is being very aware of what their position is and how they can influence the directors who are responsible for the day-to-day running. So if that sounds like something that interests you, please join us next week. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm just going to go back down to Squid. I meant Uber the company. Could a gig service be a charity? Anything can be a charity as long as you can justify the means in which that you have a charitable purpose and that it's for the public benefit. You can do it. So let's use Uber as an example. So the way that they could maybe become a charity is for whatever reason, if they decided to do this, is they were going to give old people or people in need free travel. So what they would then do is they're seeking investment from the outside public to help other people. So I'm in Wales at the moment, very rural location. So if they bought out, say, Uber Wales, I'm just making this up here now, Uber Wales, and the idea between Uber Wales was to connect people that are in the middle of nowhere with local communities. They wanted to set up a charity. Their charitable purpose is to bring people together, and it's got a public benefit because the people within this wider community benefit from it. So I hope that answers your question, Squid. If it doesn't, bob your question in there and I'll try and answer it a little bit more clearly. Who else have we got? No, I think that is everyone. You're more than welcome. Curtis, that's fine. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, great. I'll hang around for a couple of minutes. After we've done company structures, now we're then going to go on to rights and responsibilities of directors and things like that. And then what we're then going to cover up is what happens when things go wrong. So what I find quite interesting in companies is that although you're limited to liability, risk management, things like that, there's also things that you can do completely wrong. So likes of fraud. And what I want to be able to do is kind of give you some real life examples of where people have intentionally committed fraud and, they deserve to go to prison, kind of known what's called like white collar crime. And then I want to show you kind of how, unfortunately, people have innocently conducted fraud and been penalised for it. So what I want to basically be able to show you is that, there's all this fun stuff, happy days, let's all make some money. However, there's a stark reality of what happens when things go terribly wrong and the impact that that can have on you. Because when it comes in relation to fraud, all of your kind of protection that you had is out of the window, and you can kind of feel very vulnerable in that situation. So I just want to I don't want to be depressive. I just want to kind of tell people, this is how it is. These are your options that you've got. This is how to prevent it from ever happening, and how we can go from there. Did we cover cooperatives? So the reason why I didn't cover cooperative, Squid, is a cooperative would come under one of these structures. You'd pick a structure and then you'd run it as a cooperative. If you want, I can cover cooperatives, if that's, or if it's also beneficial to you, I can just knock you up a video, and we can do that for you as well. That's no problem. But no, in terms of like the co-op, you know, the actual company, the co-op, is a great example of how that has worked, and has worked for so many years. But the co-op actually started as like a department store, and you can see how over the years, you know, they had a bank, they've now dropped the bank. So they're always trying to use new things to try and make that cooperative work, and how that can kind of either work for the people, you know, in terms of the people that are working for the cooperative, because that's how the co-op works. It's for the general community around you, or it could be just for the members that are part of that. So there's loads of different ways that you can look at it. But no, Squib, if that's what you want, I'm more than happy to discuss that at a later date. Let me just nip back onto Discord if there's anything on there. Yeah, no problem at all. So if no one's got any more questions, unless you're happy with me just carrying on. But yeah, if no one's got any more questions, that's it for me. And if you'd like, come over to Discord. We've got a great community, and we've got a little bit of a section for Law Lunch Chat. Any questions that you might have, it doesn't have to be specifically relating to what we're talking about each week. That'd be benefit. It'll benefit you and benefit me. But you know, if you want to talk about anything to do with company law, law in general, how it can help, I'm more than happy to. And then just one request that I do have for you is in the Discord community, I'm looking for insight into what we can do for Series 3 and Series 4. So Series 2, after this one's finished, is all going to be about employment, what it's like to employ someone. Are you employing them on the right contract? Are you on the right contract if you're an employee? You know, how we can help you. The rights and responsibilities that an employer and employee has. And essentially, again, what happens when things go wrong. So what happens when you want to sack someone? What happens when, you know, you've sacked someone and then they come back to you and say, I'm going to take you to an employment tribunal. Like, we'll talk about all them kind of things. And then when it comes to Series 3, I am completely open to what the community wants. So if you want to talk about contract law, and we'll talk about offering a contract, accepting a contract, I'm happy to do that. If you want to talk about something else, there's a whole long load list on there. I'm happy to take recommendations outside of that list. Just that list is kind of what I feel would be most appropriate to the group. But if no one's got any more questions, I am going to end it there. Let me just double check.